that we try not to call out, so that the members of the gallery think that we're very intelligent and sensible people. So I call the member for Hawkesbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I won't be yelling too loud with my voice at the moment. So, Madam Speaker, I rise to speak on the public interest debate today on the public psychiatrist crisis, and note that this House, 1, condemns the Premier and the Minister for Mental Health for presiding over mass resignations of public sector psychiatrists, threatening the health and wellbeing of mental health patients. 2, notes modelling showing that the government's use of locums is far more expensive than the pay rise sought by psychiatrists. And 3, calls on the Minister to sit down with psychiatrists and reach an agreement to end the crisis in our public health system. Madam Speaker, once again, I stand here today to speak about a system that is failing under the Minns Labor government. Mental health is real. Mental health care is not something which should be looked at lightly or taken for granted, nor should those employed in the public health system who support the community of New South Wales be disrespected. We have seen mental health care funding in New South Wales devastated by a funding cut of $57.6 million since March 2023, leaving a broken mental health care system which lacks significant funding. It is our duty as New South Wales parliamentary representatives to support the mental health care system so that generations to come are equipped with the skills needed to effectively manage their physical and mental health, as well as self-regulate their access to resources. Funding is barely keeping up with inflation as it is. What happens when our youth aren't provided tools and assistance to manage their mental health issues? What happens when patients found guilty of heinous crimes are released back into society without proper attention to their mental health care and recovery? On the 21st of January this year, we saw hundreds of New South Wales psychiatrists resign, following a pay dispute with the Minns Labor government that has festered for over a year. Our New South Wales psychiatrists are currently paid 30% less than their interstate counterparts in Victoria and Queensland. Psychiatrists in New South Wales are seeking a 25% pay rise. As a result, some of those psychiatrists who have resigned from public health system have now signed on as casual contractors or locums, potentially benefiting from a pay increase worth tens of thousands of dollars at taxpayers' expense. Apparently, the Minns Labor government prefers to increase reliance on expensive locum doctors than to save New South Wales taxpayers $35 million a year by giving psychiatrists a 25% pay rise.
Shame.
Modelling shows a potential cost-neutral outcome. In question time yesterday, the Premier said that, quote, "we cannot afford it," end of quote. Then, referring to the Independent Review Committee, he said, and I quote, "if in the end the judge rules in favour of the increase, we will, of course, accept the decision," end quote. I'm really confused because in one breath, Premier, you're saying there is no money in the budget to cover the pay increase that psychiatrists seek, but on the other hand, you're prepared to honour the ruling of the IRC, which could include a pay increase in line with what the psychiatrists are seeking. Also, more costly than the 25% proposed pay rise is the salary of doctors who are being transitioned into filling the gaps of missing specialist psychiatrist positions until an outcome is reached through a 5-day arbitration hearing. On top of the strain being placed on the overall healthcare system, doctors stepping outside of their scope of experience is deeply concerning. Madam Speaker, psychiatrists undertake 12 years of training to develop specialised skills, and until an agreement can be reached, mental health care patients will not receive the urgent care they require, and more strain will be felt across the health professions. This is an unacceptable risk to our healthcare workers and other patients through the inadequate treatment of behaviourally disturbed patients. How can the community expect to receive the best medical care available if this continues? Since Labor was elected in March 2023, New South Wales has seen countless strikes and protests in relation to pay disputes, including paramedics, nurses, firefighters, the RTBU, and now psychiatrists. How many more will we see before 2027? Quite frankly, the Minns Labor government is making a farce of the mental health care system in New South Wales, and it's time this government stepped up and ended yet another self-inflicted industrial action crisis. The Queensland Government is already leveraging the disaster by publicly advertising directly to New South Wales psychiatrists in newspapers such as the Sydney Morning Herald and the Daily Telegraph. Ads like, "Hello New South Wales psychiatrists, Queensland is calling," says the advertisement. "Seeking better pay? We already pay more. Queensland Health, make a healthier career move." When it comes to our state psychiatrists, Premier Minns must ask what really matters. Mental health is not to be toyed with. Those suffering from mental health issues are among some of the most vulnerable in our community. Early diagnosis and intervention are not only critical to patients' well-being, but also to their family, friends, colleagues, loved ones, and the community which they live. If this issue is not resolved soon, there will be further impacts, and this will undoubtedly cause massive problems for the people of New South Wales and our society. Already I am aware that patients presenting at Nepean Hospital Triage and Assessment Centre have had to wait 4 days before receiving treatment. How is that acceptable? The Minns Labor government needs to sit down with psychiatrists and reach an agreement to end the crisis in our public health system before it's too late. Right now, Labor has fobbed off their responsibility to the Independent Review Committee after 16 months of failed negotiations. Shame on you, Labor. Your disrespect for our staff specialists is nothing short of disgraceful. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Campbelltown.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm delighted to rise tonight and lead on behalf of the government on this very important issue. And I thank the member for Hawkesbury. For bringing this matter to the House for debate. Now, I have found agreement and common ground with the member for Hawkesbury on one point that she made. She is really confused. There is no doubt about that. Can I just
stop the clock for a minute? When you refer to a member, remember you refer to their electorate, and the members over to my left are not helping. So let's not call out and let's not start this. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's continue.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I appreciate your intervention. This pay dispute is currently in arbitration. The reality is that it's before the Industrial Relations Commission, which is examining the matter on a fast-track timeline and will determine what is fair and reasonable pay increase. I note the member for Hawkesbury. I note the member for Hawkesbury's reference to the Premier's comments in the House during question time yesterday, and he will never apologise, and I will forever be delighted to speak on behalf of a Premier who is honest when he says that we can't afford. And there is an element of irony for those opposite. For 12 years, the member for Hawkesbury stated...
Can we just stop the clock again, please?
That the government won't even sit and
listen. Just stop the clock. That's okay. You're not going to lose any time. Member for Terrigal, do not call out again or you'll be on a call. Member for Oatley, same for you. It didn't sound like that to me. So could you just button up, listen and be quiet. Thank you. Thank you, member for Campbelltown.
Quote unquote, the member for Hawkesbury said that no one in this government will sit and talk. That is grossly untrue. I know that the Minister for Health, the Honourable Rose Jackson, her team, the Premier has given astute attention to this very serious issue that remained ignored for almost every single year the Liberal National Coalition government was in power. They capped their wages. And I know that those opposite do not like, we don't like putting facts into the story, but I will speak the facts. And the Premier yesterday, speaking in question time, was doing what a good Premier does, as he is, and that is just telling the truth. And why do we find ourselves with this enormous cost issue that we're trying to challenge our way through, and why we unfortunately find ourselves in the Commission? Before I continue, I met with a couple of my local public psychiatrists, and they are wonderful, amazing people. And the whole conversation I had with them, Madam Deputy Speaker, was all around their care for their patients and them being able to provide the clinical support for people in desperately need, and many people who can't afford to go out into the private sector. So this government is very committed to this cause. We are very committed to see resolution, and like the Premier yesterday said, he will accept any rulings, but he has to be real when he says we don't have the money to pay for it. But when we go into the reasons why we don't have the money to pay for it, Madam Deputy Speaker, wages were capped under the coalition, and average wage increases for psychiatry staff specialists from 2017 to 2022, Madam Deputy Speaker, from 2008 and 19, it was 2.5% from this government. From 2019 to 2020, have a guess. Do you reckon it went up? 0.3, Madam Deputy Speaker. In 2020 to 2021, they had a rise of 2.04. From 2021 to 2022, it was 2.53. Following the election of the Labor government and the Minns government in March 2023, they had a 4.5% increase, higher, almost double than what any of those opposite provided to these people. In 2024 to 2027, there is a 10.5% increase on the table that is currently being in dispute. The reality is, yet again, this government finds itself in a position, having to be honest with the people of New South Wales, everyone is coming to us because of the Conservative reign where we saw people flee to Queensland and the prosperous states of Victoria where Labor governments were in and they were looked after. But we find ourselves in a position here now in 2025 where we have 12 years of Conservative reign with no respect to our workers, no respect to our psychiatrists, a budget that had blown out to more than $180 billion in deficit whilst they'd capped everyone who was out there to care for us. The reality is, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government, the Premier and all my colleagues are committed to make sure that we do everything we can, but we can't do it overnight, but we will continue to fight for them.
Thank you. Before I call them... Before I call the member for Vaucluse, I will just remind the member for Hawkesbury that the member for Hawkesbury was on 2 calls. Will only take one more. The member for Terrigal was on 2 calls. The member for Ryde is getting very close to being on a call. The member for Oatley was on 2 calls. Now, just a reminding to you, you're on. I warned you enough today, and I asked the members on my right from the government benches, no provocation either, so please don't talk. Okay, and now I shall, the question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Vaucluse.
Thank you, Speaker. And what an appalling and embarrassing tirade from the member for Campbelltown, who didn't once mention patients. And we must always start with patients because they are the vulnerable ones in this dispute. They are the ones that are being impacted by the mass resignations that are happening on Labor's watch. Didn't happen on our watch. Don't make excuses. Don't look over your shoulder and keep blaming the opposition. This is happening on your watch. A mass resignation of staff specialists and psychiatrists, tipping an already deteriorating system into a crisis. It is a crisis of the government's own making, and the people who are paying for it are those vulnerable patients who are waiting days for mental health beds. And across New South Wales, we are seeing mental health beds closing. Emergency departments are under increasing pressure, and stretched nurses and doctors are being asked to do more with less by this Labor government. New South Wales deserves better. Mental health services are essential services. But this government has ignored the issue for 16 months and allowed it to evolve into the crisis that we have seen
Harbour.
today. The mass resignation of psychiatrists, which began in New South Wales on the 21st of January this year, did not come out of the blue. The Minister for Health and Minister for Mental Health have known about this impending situation since 23. Because in October 23, the AMA, the College of Psychiatrists and the Doctors' Union wrote to
Can we
both
just
ministers...
stop the clock for a minute, sorry?
Thank you, Speaker.
Members to my right, there's a bit of a noisy corner heading over there, so can we please be quiet, all of you, and allow the member for Vaucluse to continue. Thank you, member.
Thank you, Speaker, because the AMA, College of Psychiatrists and the Doctors' Union wrote to both of those ministers requesting an urgent meeting and setting out what they saw as the perilous circumstances surrounding the psychiatry workforce in New South Wales. Alarm bells sent directly to this government, and the Minister for Mental Health has seen that since 23. She has utterly failed to address it. While psychiatrists were resigning and the mental health patients were left waiting in emergency departments, she was sipping Chardonnay and being ferried around the Hunter Valley at taxpayers' expense. It is the truth. It is the truth, and it is disgraceful. The government says they don't have the money to pay staff specialist psychiatrists, but at the same time, I find these interjections offensive because this is a serious issue and it should be keeping you up at night. You should be listening.
Okay,
You're certainly not listening
can I
to
just
the
stop the clock
psychiatrists.
again? I'm sorry. Members on both sides, stop the interjections, please. Thank you. Thank you.
And it doesn't even make economic sense because you have a surreal situation at the moment where a staff specialist psychiatrist resigning today is being employed tomorrow as a VMO on a much higher salary. Psychiatrists being engaged as locums from recruitment agencies are earning as much as $3,050 a day. And about a third of the psychiatrists who have now resigned have rejoined as contractors. And the government isn't telling us how much it will cost. The Guardian today reported that modelling shows the government could save $35 million a year and improve patient care by giving psychiatrists the pay rise. The public deserves transparency about just how much the government has spent to date on this crisis of their making. What will be harder to measure, though, is the cost to patients and their families. Dollars matter, but the damage and pain to vulnerable patients who are bearing the brunt of these resignations is something for which this government should be truly ashamed. According to health stats in New South Wales, in the 23 to 24 financial year, there were 130,040 emergency department presentations for mental health in New South Wales. We know that rates of presentation for self-harm or suicidal thoughts were consistently higher among young females. Every hour waiting for the care that they needed to receive, it only worsens their situation. We have young people, we have homeless people who have not the option of going to a private psychiatrist. These are the faces of current crisis. It's not the fault of our psychiatrists, doctors or nurses who are incredibly compassionate, caring and working very hard under the circumstances. It is certainly not the fault of the patients. The test of any government is how it treats its most vulnerable, and on that test this government has failed. Chris Minns must resolve this crisis and come clean on just how much this failure of this government has cost the taxpayers of New South Wales.
Madam Speaker.
Just before I call the member for Blue Mountains again, I just ask members to use their best manners and no interjecting. I've got Panadols of the Speaker that I'm not afraid to use for myself this afternoon, sitting right here. I call the member for member for Blue Mountains.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just before I start, I am going to move an amendment to this motion that we remove all words after house and insert 1, notes the former Liberal National Government's wages cap saw a real wages decline for psychiatrists in the public health system. 2, opposes the reintroduction of the wages cap on psychiatrists in the public health system. 3, notes most psychiatrists have converted to visiting medical officer
just stop the clock
VMO
again?
arrangements.
Sorry, the member for Oatley, you are almost on your last call. So I don't want to hear again from you unless you're speaking politely with the debate. So please do not interject again. Thank you. Thank you, Member for Blue Mountains.
Number 3 notes most psychiatrists have converted to visiting medical officer VMO arrangements, not a locum arrangement, as these arrangements cost less than a 25% increase. 4 notes the concerns about the resignation of psychiatrists and its potential impacts on the health system and mental health patients. And 5 supports the expedited arbitration process the New South Wales Government and psychiatrist worker representatives are undertaking in the Industrial Relations Commission. There we go.
Great amendment. Great amendment.
Madam Speaker, as we've heard today, the wage negotiations with New South Wales psychiatrists is actually a very complex issue. And I would like to start out by reiterating comments that everyone has made here, and that psychiatrists are a deeply valued and essential part of our healthcare system, and we recognise that the vital work they do for the community is essential. We're all aware that psychiatrists are asking for a 25% pay rise in a single year. Now, public sector wages were capped under the previous government for over a decade, and that creates the wage disparity at the heart of this dispute.
So we're cleaning up their mess.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
Since coming to government, the Men's Labor team has sought to resolve this issue by meeting with representatives of the staff specialist psychiatrists on many occasions and offering a number of things. A 4.5% wage increase in 2023. That's a lot more than the 2.5% wages cap. Proposing a 10.5% pay increase, including super, over the next 3 years, and a pilot of productivity measures to further improve wages and conditions for psychiatrists. And as has been noted before, we are committed, of course, to reaching a resolution, but we can't fix a decade-long wages cap overnight. It's not feasible. The government is offering an extra 10.5% over 3 years on top of the existing 4.5% increase, and this represents 15%, including super increases, Madam Speaker, in the first 4 years of a Labor government. This is a fair and reasonable offer, and it's the largest pay rise offered to this group in over a decade. I'll just say that again. It's the largest pay increase offered to this team of hard workers in over a decade. Wow. The government has tried for months to negotiate a sustainable outcome with psychiatrists, but the threat of mass resignations as a negotiation tactic does not enable negotiations to continue. Despite this, the Ministry of Health, Madam Speaker, has put extensive contingency plans in place to manage the impacts of psychiatry resignations. And these plans have so far limited the impact to less than 1% of physical mental health bed capacity. And that's important to keep in mind in the emotion around this. While there has been limited use of locums to deal with resignations, the use of them in this crisis is a short-term measure as we work towards that long-term solution that everyone wants. The 25% award increase is permanent and unfeasible. So I'd like to finish off by noting that the government, all of us, acknowledge the hard work of psychiatrists in our healthcare system, and I am sure that all of us here who represent our communities have heard some of the most harrowing stories from our constituents, from those healthcare practitioners, and we would stand and defend them any day and their work. We are committed to finding that resolution and to see arbitration through the IRC, make sure that is reasonable, it's a viable mechanism and it's fair. And just finish off, thank you again to the work of the psychiatrists. We'll see you at the table. Thank you.
The question is the motion be agreed to. I call the member for North Shore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the member for Hawkesbury's motion today, and that's because for me mental health is personal. Last year when my father died and I visited him in the coroner's court, it was the first time I'd seen him in decades because undiagnosed schizophrenia had fractured our family as children and led to an unsafe environment for my sisters and I. Years later, when he was diagnosed, the health system let him down when he went to a public hospital for psychiatric care and was sent home and told everything would be okay, and then he went on to attempt to murder his mother and 2 neighbours. So for me, hospital psychiatric care is personal. Last year, shortly after he died, we saw the horrific stabbings in Bondi Junction. And we all know that the assailant at that time had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And when we looked at the horror across our community and the fear that this could impact any of us at any moment, because people with schizophrenia, people with acute mental health disorders, when untreated, when uncared for, can have that kind of impact on our society, we were all in fear and we were all concerned about the state of our mental health system. And for the 6 people who died that day, for their families, for the ones who care for them, for all those injured, for people across their community, that was personal. The issue that we have today is that the government of New South Wales is not showing the care that the people of this state need for their mental health needs. Already, before the current psychiatric staff shortages, we saw that there were 30 to 40% vacancies across hospitals for staff psychiatrist positions. For the children with suicidal ideation, for those experiencing eating disorders, for those who are dealing with new diagnoses, that is incredibly personal. When you already can't access the psychiatric care that you need in a hospital, when you can't afford it in the private system, or you can't access it because of waiting lists in the private system, we are letting down the people in our society who need care the most. When the government says to us that they are dealing with it, when the minister says it's being taken care of, or when she says it's being dealt with, that's not addressing the challenge that real people are facing across our state. At the moment, we have an epidemic of mental health crises across New South Wales, across Australia. We know it, every person in this chamber knows it. But what we don't realise is that when we don't deal with it early on and early enough on, when we don't diagnose, when we don't treat, when we don't care for people, not only do we not give people the right and the opportunity to live fulfilling lives, we harm people, every single person close to them, and we risk harm to people they don't even know. We have an obligation, a responsibility to act on this. We know the facts. We know there are huge vacancies. We know that our psychiatrists are quitting in droves because they feel that they don't have not just the pay that they need, but a system that supports them, working conditions that support them, looking at things like overnight rosters that don't reflect their own needs, their own capabilities, being on call excessively, receiving the types of phone calls to administer treatment that doesn't reflect the challenges that they have in meeting the needs of their clients, of their patients. We know that. So how do we make it better? Part of it's pay. A big part of it is pay. And the reason you see so much frustration on this side is because we know that the government isn't acting. The government is giving lip service to the dire circumstances that our mental health facilities across our hospitals are experiencing. When we have a minister who, very frankly, is more interested in travelling to Japan, posting photos of popping bottles of champagne, travelling to wineries for her birthday, during the middle of a mental health crisis, we know that she is asleep at the wheel. We know that. The member for Cessnock, we know that. We know that. And what this government needs to do...
Ask to stop the clock, please. Thank you. Member for Cessnock. Thank you. Thank you. Let's continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And what this government needs to do is realise that these are real people and real people's lives, real people's horror stories and traumas. And our psychiatrists are already choosing to work in the public system, often at a financial disadvantage, because they believe in the work that they are doing and the patients that need them the most. So let's stop sending them interstate. Let's stop sending them into locum positions or VMOs. Let's stop sending them into private psychiatry. Let's invest in them. Let's do the job that the government was elected to do and actually resolve this crisis. Do the work that you need to do to make people safe, to keep people well and healthy, and to give them every opportunity in life. Because for all of us here, mental health has to be personal.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for South Coast.
Thank you,
Before you begin, sorry, can we just... Okay, thank you. We'll start again. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Assistant Speaker. The focus of the New South Wales Government is to ensure uninterrupted, high-quality patient care. The extensive contingency plans put in place to manage the potential impacts of any disruptions to psychiatric services have done this. We deeply value the work of our psychiatrists and we recognise their critical role in our healthcare system. However, we also have a responsibility to maintain a stable and accessible mental health system for all of the people of New South Wales. While the government does hope for a negotiated outcome, we cannot afford to be unprepared. The New South Wales Government has been proactively developing and implementing a multifaceted contingency plan to mitigate any potential service disruptions. Our priority is to ensure that individuals experiencing mental health crises continue to receive the care they need when they need it. Our contingency planning is built on several key pillars. We have utilised locums, but mostly visiting medical officers or VMO arrangements. While locums are more expensive options, VMOs are not more expensive than a 25% pay increase. The use of locums is a necessary short-term measure to maintain a mental health system while this issue is resolved. This allows us to bridge any gaps in service and maintain essential inpatient and outpatient services. We have also established a comprehensive network of support systems. The Mental Health Emergency Operations Centre is a statewide multi-agency centre designed to support local health districts and specialty health networks with patient flow and capacity management. It acts as a central coordination point, enabling us to efficiently allocate resources and manage patient needs across the state. This ensures that patients are directed to the most appropriate care setting and that hospitals are not overwhelmed. Alongside this is our statewide short-term escalation plan, or STEP. This plan identifies the impact on system-wide operations at various escalation levels and outlines the specific actions to be taken at each stage. STEP provides a clear framework for responding to potential disruptions, ensuring a coordinated and measured approach. It allows us to proactively anticipate challenges and implement appropriate responses swiftly and effectively. To further manage patient flow, we have implemented statewide load adjustment strategies. These strategies distribute mental health patients across New South Wales emergency health departments, preventing any single facility from becoming overburdened. This ensures that patients can access timely care and that hospitals maintain the capacity to respond to emergencies. We are also leveraging the New South Wales Psychiatry Virtual Hubs, which provide a brief assessment and escalation psychiatric service. These hubs offer remote consultations and support increasing access to care, particularly in rural and remote areas. The New South Wales Government is focused on a long-term solution and system reform. The Agency for Clinical Innovation and Critical Intelligence Unit is leading a rapid design approach to identify and attest innovative models of care. A key purpose of this redesign program is to attract and retain psychiatrists and mental health clinicians, supporting them through the models of care that allow them to work their top of scope. This includes exploring new ways of delivering mental health services, improving working conditions, and creating a more supportive working environment for clinicians. The short-term objectives of this program are to generate evidence, to assess current and innovative mental health models of care, and to apply a rapid redesign approach to prototype prioritised models. The long-term objectives include identifying opportunities to scale promising models and contributing to system-wide strategies for mental health service reform. This proactive approach aims to create a more resilient and sustainable mental health system for the future. The fact is, we remain committed to finding a resolution to the current pay dispute. Our primary focus is on ensuring the continued provision of high-quality mental health care to the people of New South Wales. We want to be clear. If you need mental health support, it is available, and please do reach out for help.
Great contribution.
Yes, and the question is the motion be agreed to. Just for the member for Hornsby who's new, there's always one spot allocated for a member of the crossbench in the public interest debate, and that person will be the member for Wagga Wagga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to make a brief contribution on this debate, and I do want to thank the member for Hawkesbury for raising this issue and this motion today. This dispute has been something that I've watched and has distressed me, I have to say. Let me start, first of all, by reiterating many of the comments people have made in support of our public psychiatrists, and that's come from both sides. This particular group of psychiatrists are highly skilled, and they work and care for patients that are some of our sickest and most vulnerable who get care in our public system. The services that they provide are something that we should all be proud of. The services that they lead, the teams that they lead, we should be proud of. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of knowing many of the individuals and speaking with them. And I want to thank them for the work that they've done for many years. I also want to reflect on the fact that they have a deep professional commitment to their work. And in speaking with many of them, decisions to leave the system or change employment have been agonising, have not been reached in any way until there's been much consideration. And it saddens me that this issue has been bubbling away in the New South Wales health system for quite some time. And it's my view that it has been essentially not addressed, almost, I wouldn't say ignored, but just not given the priority it should have had. And that is what has led to the action that has been taken by the psychiatrists. And it's my deep concern that it reflects a much deeper disdain for medical staff, especially specialists within our public system, that I believe the current government really needs to address. Now, there is a process in place now, I accept that. But the underlying issue for the psychiatrist here was really that they believed that they were losing professional expertise to other states, and that our system was at real risk of losing critical services, and that there needed to be a heartfelt, genuine, active approach to recruitment and retention. Now, I understand that the debate has focused on the wage rise. I understand the government's issues at the moment, the real financial pressures that they are under, the fact that they can't commit to large wage rises for their health workforce, that they have nurses that are currently campaigning for wage rises. But in this particular instance, I don't actually believe the core issue was about wage rises. The core issue was about making sure that there was a proactive response to staffing our medical system. And I think at heart, the issue was about having respect for our clinicians and in particular for our senior specialists. It's very easy to diss highly paid doctors. It's very easy to whack the medical profession. But these doctors are highly skilled, 12 years of training plus, many years of experience. They work at the coalface with some of our most vulnerable people, and I'm afraid the feedback that I've had is that they do not believe that they have been treated with the respect that they should have received. Now, I understand there's a process now that's going forward, but I really believe that this government could have taken action much sooner, much more actively, and treated these clinicians with a much better process. It's good to see some sort of process is underway now, but the fact that it came to this is frankly very distressing. So I do want to express those concerns, and I do want to express my solidarity, particularly with the specialists in our public health system. They provide core services, leadership, the backbone, and you can't equate, the staff specialists here do so much more than clinical work. They do non-clinical work that locums will not do. I mean, locums are not a solution, and so much of our health system now is relying on locums because of these issues with pay rises. But locums do not provide leadership of teams. They do not provide quality of care. They do not provide teaching, training, the next generation. And so let's not walk away from the fact that we want well-rewarded, well-respected, well-regarded staff in our public health system, particularly our specialist doctors. They need that respect and they need that support. And I certainly will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
The member for Oatley seeks leave. Are you seeking leave to speak, member? No. You sure? Is leave granted? No, I didn't get it. Hang on, I didn't even get a chance to even ask. Can we start that again? Member for Oatley. The member for Oatley is seeking leave to speak. Is leave granted? I'm sorry, but remember, you haven't been granted leave. So now we move to the next step, which is what's going to happen next. The original question. But beg your pardon. Should allow you to have your reply. I'm sorry about that. I call the member for Hawkesbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the member for Campbelltown, Vaucluse, Blue Mountains, North Shore, South Coast and Wagga Wagga for their contribution to this debate. Pardon? And the opportunity almost came for the member for Oatley, but we'll perhaps save that for another time. The member for Blue Mountains talked about the horrific stories of mental health that she was aware of. Well, can I say to you, the stories are just going to increase as this continues to fester and bubble when there's no solution in sight, because this government, the Labor government, has ignored the opportunity for 15 months, more than 15 months, to do something about this. Madam Speaker, I have a right to reply in silence.
Thank you. Member, can we just stop the clock a bit? Thank you. Member for Blue Mountains. Quiet, please. Thank you. Thank you. We'll return.
Thank you. The member for Vaucluse succinctly spoke of the patient neglect, because she connects with staff specialists and those working in the public health system every single week. She sees firsthand what they're dealing with, and I thank her for her contribution. Also, the member for South Coast, well, you talk about plugging the gaps, that the government has a solution when all of these psychiatrists fall by the wayside and have those vacancies there. New ways of dealing with it. Is that about pushing the responsibility onto the current nurses and doctors who are at massive risk in emergency departments when those with mental health issues are presented? And down at Nepean Hospital, only in the last week, 4 days before any treatment could be dealt with for one particular individual. That's an absolute disgrace. You should be disgusted that you're there on your watch that this has happened. I want to say, and I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, may I please continue in silence?
Yes, I agree, and whoever that was, I think that was a member for Wine.
For Blacktown, but I won't be saying any further on that.
Oh, sorry?
Sorry.
Blacktown, yes.
No, not Blacktown.
Sorry.
Sorry, member for Blacktown.
Sorry, it was a member for
Came across this
Blacktown. Sorry, member.
The member for Wyong. Thank you. He's
Sorry, member for Wyong.
discreetly commenting.
Minister.
Can I also thank the member for Wagga on their contribution. Sorry, my voice is waving. You spoke with great intent. You spoke with great understanding of the situation, and I hear that you have been constantly connecting with them, and you expressed their thoughts very, very articulately. So I thank you for that. You understand the grief. It's not about even having an industrial dispute and going on strike. They feel so passionate about the situation they're in, they've actually resigned their jobs. These psychiatrists have bills to pay, they have mortgages to pay, they have children to educate in school, they have to put food on the table, and they're so distressed about the way this Labor government has treated them that they've resigned. Okay. Madam Speaker, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to reply, and I go forward with an opportunity to act further. Thank you.
And I apologise that I wasn't paying attention before. The original question was that the motion as moved by the member for Hawkesbury be agreed to, upon which the member for Blue Mountains has moved that the motion be amended. The question is that the amendment moved by the member for Blue Mountains is agreed to. All of that opinion, please say aye. Aye. Against? No. I believe the ayes have it. A division has been called. Please ring the bells.